Okay, class, today we're going to do solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So keep in mind, like I told you, it's important that you memorize this because at some point in time that's going to be a value. So I want you to know that x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. You have plenty of time over the Thanksgiving break, so I want you to put that to memory. Okay, let's look at the first problem. So I know that I need to put this in standard form in order for me to solve it. So I know basically I have to set it equal to 0. So I know my 4x is going to have to move. So I know that what I really have is x squared minus 4x minus 12 equal to 0. So now that I've done that, I can denote what my a, b, and c is. So I know that my a is a 1, my b is a negative 4, and my c is a negative 12. So now that I know what my a, b, and c is, kind of like you do when you're trying to SPT it, now that I know what my a, b, c is, I can use my radical formula. So when writing the quadratic formula, always put parentheses in place of the variables. So I know I got negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. So now I'm going to plug in my values into those parentheses. So I know that my b is a negative 4. I know my a is a 1. And I know my c is a negative 12. So now I'm just going to reduce this. So I know I really have a negative 4 is really 4 plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared is 16. And then 4 times 12 is 48. So when I add them together, what do I get? That's correct, 64. And that's going to be over 2. So now I know that the square root of 64 is 8. So I realize that what this really says is 4 plus or minus 8 over 2. So I know I just got to separate that. So what that really says is 4 plus 8 over 2 and 4 minus 8 over 2. So my final answer will be 8 plus 4 is 12 divided by 2 is 6. And then 4 minus 8 is negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So my solution, my x-intercepts will be 6, negative 2. So now remember, when it asks you for your solutions or it's saying to solve, it is saying find out what my x is. So now let's work number 2. So on number 2, they were nice and I already put it in standard form and set it equal to 0. So it's easy for me to plug in my values because I know that my a is 5, my b is negative 4, my c is negative 2. So when I write my negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now I'm going to plug in my values. So I know I have a negative 4, a 5, a negative 2, and a 5. So when I multiply that out, I'm going to have 4 plus or minus the square root, and we're going to take it step by step. So I'm going to get 16, and if I multiply 4 times 5, I get negative 20 times negative 2, I get positive 40. That's going to be over 10. Well, I recognize that that's really 4 plus or minus the square root of 56 over 10. But don't forget what we did on the assignment yesterday on radicals. I know that the square root of 56 is really 2 times 28, and then 2 times 14, and then 2 times 7. So now that I have my prime factorization, I know that I'm going to be able to pull a 2 out and leave a 14 under there. So I realize what this really says is 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 14 over 10. So now what I want to do is I want to reduce that, because 4, 2, and 10 are all divisible by 2. You never reduce what's out of the radical. So when I reduce the others by 2, I end up with 2 plus or minus, and you can put the 1, but you don't have to, square root of 14 over 5. So to write my final answer separately, I would have 2 plus square root of 14 over 5, as well as 2 minus square root of 14 over 5. So that would be my solution. Okay, so now let's look at the next one. Remember, if you're not done writing that down, just pause your video here. So now they weren't so gracious here as to write it where I can easily see my A, B, and C. So I just got to move it over and set equal to 0. So I know that's really 2x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. So I know my A is 2, my B is negative 4, and my C is 1. So again, I'm going to put my brackets. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in my B values, which is a negative 4. And then I'm going to plug in my A values, which is a 2. And then my C values, which is a 1. So when I multiply this out, I'm going to get 4 plus or minus negative 4 squared is going to give me 16. That's going to be minus the 8, and that's going to be over 4. So I know that that's going to give me 4 plus or minus the square root of 8 over 4. And we should just remember that we just did the square root of 8. So we know the square root of 8 is 2 square root of 2. If not, I'm going to need you to work on your radicals. So I know that really says 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 2 over 4. So those are divisible by 2. When I divide those by 2, I'm going to be left with 2 plus or minus square root of 2 over 2. So I would write that as 2 plus square root of 2 over 2 and 2 minus square root of 2 over 2. That would be my solution set. Okay, so now I want you to go ahead and work 4 and 5, and then we'll check it when you're in class. Have a good day.